So we have gone over to React Learn under React Dev. This contains documentation on how you can use React. Before, I talked about how it's used to display data, how to respond to events and update the screen. So this is events handling. It's something that I haven't covered. So since React is a JavaScript UI library, it also used for events handling, and then how to share data between components. You can use hooks like useState to do that. So this is the quick start on the React Learn platform. So here they're talking about creating and nesting components. I mentioned how you can have a component within another component. That is basically an example of nesting. So React apps are made out of components. A component is a piece of UI that has its own logic and appearance. So a button can be a component, and then there's also a component as large as an entire page. So here we have a button component. Use a function to declare and define components. It usually starts with a capital letter, my button. So most React components begin with a capital letter. Take note of that. And then you've declared my button, you nest it into another component. So the component we are nesting our button into is called my app. So my app is probably the entire page where you're going to have your button. I'm going to show you the user interface, how it looks like. And then while we're using JSX, remember we're starting with the return statement, and then we have parentheses. Within the parentheses, we have our HTML, we have a division, we have a header, welcome to my app, and then we have my button. So we are inheriting, or we are calling the my button component that we already defined over here right above my app. Notice my button starts with a capital letter, while HTML tags must be in lowercase. Please take note of that. So here is our application right over here. Welcome to my app. I am a button. So right now I'm clicking the button and nothing is happening. So we've not yet put in events handling function, but you'll see next time I click a button, something is going to change. So you have function my button, you're going to return a button tag in HTML, and you have a heading H1, welcome to my app. So my app is the entire page, and then your button is within the my app component. So that's basically an example of nesting. You have a component within another component. So you can also add styling within your JSX. So remember, we define CSS classes by using class name equal to. So we have a class name of avatar right here down below, and then within our HTML image tag, we're going to give it a class name avatar. An avatar is a rounded image, just like you're seeing in my camera right over here. So this CSS class is written on a separate CSS file. I will show you separate index.css files and separate app.css files in the code application. So that's how you display data. Another way of displaying data with JSX, it lets you input your components and its properties within curly braces. So an example of curly braces is right now we have user.name. So we have a user component and we have a property of that component, which is name. So that's how you can display components within JSX using these curly braces. You can also use other JSX attributes. For example, image URL, we will use source is equal to user.image URL. So that is how basically we display data. So the example is right here within our Jupyter notebook, how to display data. So you have a header. It's going to inherit the user component, and it's going to inherit the property or the prop name. So we have user.name within the JSX of our React application. So that is right here. Heidi Lamar, I think she's a musician, if I'm not mistaken. And then we are also inheriting the image URL, and we have an alt text that contains the alt attributes of that image. So even the styling is written within JSX, the width and the height. So right here we have our user component. Here are the properties. You have the name prop, the image URL prop, and then the image size. These are all properties of the user component. You have a header one, which contains the user name, and then you have another HTML image tag, and then within the image tag you have your CSS, it's an avatar, and then the source is the user image URL. So you are inheriting from the user component the property of image URL, and then you have other stylings. You have an alter text for the username, that's for the photo, and then you have more styling. You're going to use width, and then you are inheriting user.image size, the image size prop from the user component, and you're also inheriting the size from the user image size prop or property. I hope that's easy for you guys to understand. So we can continue scrolling. Yeah, you can also use double curly braces within JSX. So you have conditional rendering. I think we mentioned how we can use if statements within JSX. So we have a condition. I think my application also has this condition. If you are logged in, inherit the admin panel component, else inherit the login form page component. So if you're logged in, you will automatically be sent straight to your admin panel. If you aren't logged in, you'll be sent to the login form component, and then you return the contents component. So you're using conditional rendering to find which component should be rendered to your React page. You can also use a conditional question mark operator instead of using if else statements. So here we have a question mark is logged in question mark. If it's true, you're sent to the admin panel. Else we use a colon. So if it's not true that you are logged in, then first login, we render for you the login form component. So we also have logical and syntax. If you are logged in, it sends you straight to the admin panel. So all this information is on the React Dev land page, and then you can also render lists. Now, for example, you have a list, you can use a for loop, or you can use the map function to render lists. So we have component for products, and then we have attributes within the component. We have the title and we have the ID. These are the properties of our products component. And then we have the code right here. We have another component, which is list items components, to list these products. And we are going to use the .map function to loop through this array instead of a for loop. And we are going to identify the products by their ID and their title. And we're going to use the HTML list tag. And we're going to use JSX to return an ordered list, which is probably a list that's not numbered. We are using bullets in this case. I think you can see over here. This is our full app. It's the app.js component. So the app contains lists. It contains the products component. We have the properties of the components, its ID, and then its titles. And then within our Jupyter notebook, we have a shopping list component, which is going to loop through the list of the products items within products component. So within our products component, we are going to inherit the product ID, which is going to be our key unique attribute to identify the products. And then we have CSS. So here are the double curly braces. They mentioned the explanation for using JSX syntax. You can use double curly braces. It's not a special syntax, but a regular object inside the style equals curly braces within JSX. So there's nothing special about the double curly braces, but you have an object within your CSS JSX syntax in React. So the object is fruit because of the products list. So the products list has fruits and vegetables. So the question we are asking within our conditional question mark operator is that if the product is a fruit, give it a color magenta. If it's a fruit, magenta is kind of like purple pink, and then else give it a dark green color. So as you can see over here, cabbage and garlic are vegetables, so they have the dark green color, and then the fruit we have is an apple, so it has the magenta color. So let's go back to our Jupyter notebook. So the product title should be within our list, and also its color. It's an unordered list, that's why we have UL tag right over here. So how do we respond to events with React? How do we handle events? Events handling is a process of navigating through your web page using your mouse or using the keyboard, the down and upward keys. You respond by declaring an events handler function inside your component. So within your button component, my button, we are going to use an events handler to handle the clicks from my mouse, and then it will give me an alert that you clicked me, and then we'll return a button. We'll do an event handling with on click is equal to handle click. Now this all happens within the JavaScript DOM. I'll do a video to explain that. You don't have to understand everything right now. And then our button, the text within our button is click me. So let's scroll down and we see how we handle events once I have clicked, right? So this is an events handler on click that we are returning with JSX. So that will update my screen. So this updating of the screen happens once a button is clicked. So the state of the component also changes. So here we are using a count. We are setting the initial state of our count to 0. You're going to see an illustration of that below. And we're going to use states to manage our count component. So we have a button, my button, and then we are setting its count to 0. We are initializing that state, and then we are going to use an events handler to handle the clicks. Once a click is made, the count increases by 1. So that's the set count state we are using within this code. So once you click the count, it shows that it has been clicked and the number of times it has been clicked. So we are inheriting the count state right here within JSX. We're using curly braces again. So we import use state immediately at the beginning of every JavaScript file that you have. So within app.js component, the moment you are using a hook, you must import it at the beginning of every file. So we import useState from React within our app.js component. So this is the entire app.js component right over here. It contains counters, it contains a header, counters that update separately. You have 2 buttons here. So the current state of our application is that the buttons have been clicked 0 times. So within the my button functional component, we have a counter and we are setting the count state to 0, and then we have a click handler. It will increment by 1 once I click on it. So you can see what has just happened here, that it's incrementing by 1 every time I'm clicking. So that is a form of events handling in React and JavaScript. So we have a return function. We're handling clicks on every button that we have from the my button component. So we have 2 buttons within our front end, and each time you click, it increments by 1. So that is an example of events handling with React and JavaScript and JSX. So that's it for the React dev.learn quick start. I've taken you through, and I believe in your own time you can also look through this to get a better understanding on how these React components state. We've talked about events handling, we've talked about hooks, we've talked about components, we've talked about lists, conditional rendering, and everything